The missing money, drained piece by piece over weeks, wasn't just documented. Tyler had quietly orchestrated a recovery, moving it into a secure place only he and I could access, locking out the chaos before it could spread further. "Dad," he said without looking up, voice calm but resolute, "I've got it handled. Don't worry." Have you ever had a moment where everything in your life looks fine, bills paid, routines locked in, your kid doing homework at the kitchen table, and then one tiny detail hits you so hard it feels like the floor tilts under your feet? That's how this started. Not with screaming, not with cheating, with a bank notification I almost ignored. The kind you swipe away because adulthood teaches you that panic is childish and calm is maturity. Except nobody really tells you that calm can also be fear wearing a suit. I was standing in line for coffee, half awake, scrolling without thinking, when I noticed the balance in our son Tyler's college fund didn't look right. Not market dip wrong, not fees wrong, but straight up missing money wrong. And instead of anger or suspicion, my first reaction was denial, telling myself I must have remembered the number wrong, that transfers happen, that I should trust my wife because trust is what responsible adults do. That's the story we sell ourselves, that loyalty means not asking questions, that confrontation equals insecurity, that noticing patterns makes you paranoid. But the truth is I didn't want to look closer, because looking closer meant risking the version of my life I'd worked so hard to keep stable. My wife had been distant for months, always busy, always tired, always stepping outside to take calls she never used to hide. But I explained it away like a pro, telling myself marriages cool off, routines replace passion, and being boring is just part of growing up. And honestly, I felt weirdly proud of myself for staying chill, for not snooping, for not being that guy who spirals over vibes. Meanwhile, Tyler was around more than I realized, quiet on the couch with his headphones on, doing homework, blending into the background the way kids do when adults assume they're not paying attention. Which is wild because kids see way more than we give them credit for, we just pretend they don't because it's convenient. That night at dinner, I casually brought up the college account, trying to sound relaxed, and my wife didn't panic or snap. She smiled and said something vague about moving money around, about short-term stuff, and that smile should have scared me more than yelling ever could, because it wasn't confused, it was ready, like she'd practiced it. I nodded along, swallowed the lump in my throat, and told myself I was doing the right thing by not pushing, because pushing might crack something I wasn't ready to face. Later, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I told myself all men don't jump to conclusions. That love means trust even when things feel off. But deep down I knew the truth was uglier. I wasn't being mature. I was being scared. Scared of being wrong and even more terrified of being right. Down the hall, Tyler's bedroom light was still on way past his bedtime. His door cracked open just enough for a thin line of light to spill into the hallway. And as I passed by, I had this strange, fleeting thought about how we spend so much time thinking we're protecting our kids from the world, when sometimes the real danger is the stuff we refuse to see inside our own homes. I still thought I was protecting my family by staying calm. I didn't know yet that the person paying the closest attention wasn't me. The next morning felt quieter than it should have. Not peaceful, pressed. The kind of quiet that makes every small sound feel exposed. Like the coffee machine hissing too loud or the floorboards creaking as if they were reporting something. Tyler was already at the kitchen table, fully dressed for school, backpack zipped, cereal untouched. His eyes flicked up at me once, then dropped back to his tablet. Not sleepy, not distracted, focused. I tried to sound normal, asking about school, reminding him about a quiz he'd mentioned earlier in the week, but he barely nodded, his fingers tapping a slow, steady rhythm on the table that didn't match a 10-year-old killing time before the bus. That's when I noticed what was on his screen. Not a game, not homework. Rows of numbers laid out neatly, cells shaded in different colors, dates aligned in columns, a spreadsheet. I asked what he was working on, expecting him to swipe it away or shrug, but instead he turned the tablet toward me, calm in a way that made my stomach tighten, and said, "I was just checking something." What he showed me was our account history, exported into the same budgeting app I'd set up last year, the one I'd casually shown him the basics of when he asked how numbers talk to each other. The entries weren't random, they were sorted, filtered, grouped. The amounts weren't round, the timing wasn't sloppy, and my first reaction wasn't pride or amazement, it was fear, sharp and immediate. Because realizing your kid understands something you don't feels like finding out you've been driving with your eyes half closed. He walked me through it slowly, not like a kid showing off, but like someone explaining directions. He pointed out how the withdrawals were staggered, how the amount stayed just low enough to avoid obvious alerts, how they lined up with late-night windows and paydays. He said he'd noticed the pattern weeks ago, and when I asked how long he'd been looking at it, he shrugged and said, "A while." Like that answer didn't carry weight. That was the moment it clicked. This wasn't curiosity. It was concern. He told me he'd started paying attention when Mom began taking calls near the garage, when she started locking her phone, when she checked the bank app more than she checked the weather. All the things I'd explained away as stress suddenly rearranged themselves into something sharper, something harder to ignore. I wanted to tell him to stop, to remind him he was a kid, that this wasn't his job. But the words didn't come because I didn't know what my job was anymore. He pulled up another sheet, one tracking balances over time, showing how tiny discrepancies stacked quietly into something much bigger than I wanted to name. I asked why he hadn't told me sooner. He looked at me then, not smug, not scared, just steady, and said, "I wasn't sure you were ready to see it." As the clock crept toward the bus schedule and Tyler closed his tablet like this was just another finished task, I realized the scariest part wasn't what my wife might be doing, it was that my 10-year-old had been watching everything while I'd been busy convincing myself that calm meant control. The next few days passed in a muted haze, like I was moving through my life with the volume turned down, everything technically normal but emotionally off. The way it feels when you're driving a familiar road with your eyes half closed. Morning still started with coffee and toast. Tyler still packed his school bag at the counter. My wife still moved through the house like nothing had changed, but once you notice a crack, you can't stop seeing how far it runs. Suddenly all the little things I'd brushed off started lining up in my head whether I wanted them to or not, the late nights, the sudden interest in reorganizing finances, the way she angled her phone just enough to feel intentional. I kept telling myself I was overthinking it, that this was what anxiety looked like when you fed it too much caffeine and not enough sleep. But denial has a way of pretending its logic, and I was very good at pretending. What I wasn't prepared for was Tyler quietly inserting himself into the space I'd been avoiding, not with questions or accusations, but with information. One afternoon after school, he slid into the chair beside me, opened my laptop like it was the most natural thing in the world, and asked if he could show me something he'd been messing around with. I almost said no out of habit. That reflex adults have to keep kids out of grown-up problems. But something in his tone stopped me, not urgent, not scared, just steady. He pulled up a spreadsheet, nothing fancy, just rows and columns, the same budgeting app I'd set up last year when he got curious about how money worked, and started clicking through tabs with a focus that made my stomach tighten. He'd been tracking the college account balance over time, nothing obsessive, just notes he'd taken after overhearing conversations or seeing statements left open on the kitchen counter. And there it was. Laid out clean and unemotional, small withdrawals that didn't look alarming on their own, spread out just enough to feel harmless, but stacked together they told a story I didn't want to finish reading. He showed me dates and amounts that weren't round or obvious, transfers that slipped through because they didn't trigger alarms, and I felt this slow, creeping realization settle in. This hadn't been a single bad decision or a misunderstanding, it was a pattern. Tyler didn't say, "Mom did this," didn't accuse or dramatize it. He just pointed at the screen and waited, giving me space to catch up emotionally to what he'd already processed logically. That might have been the hardest part, realizing my 10-year-old had been sitting with this knowledge while I was congratulating myself on staying calm. I remember asking him how long he'd been watching, and he shrugged in that kid way that pretends indifference but really means everything, saying he'd noticed things felt off a while ago and wanted to understand before saying anything because he didn't want to be wrong. That hit me harder than the numbers ever could, the idea that while I was avoiding discomfort, my son was learning caution, patience, and silence for all the wrong reasons. I wanted to shut the laptop, to tell him this was adult stuff and I'd handle it, but the truth was already sitting between us, undeniable and neatly organized. As I stared at those quiet rows of data, I realized this wasn't just about missing money anymore, it was about the fact that the patterns were real. And the only thing more dangerous than seeing them was pretending I still didn't. I didn't know it yet. But Tyler wasn't done observing, and the next move would hit harder than anything I'd imagined. The morning sunlight spilled across the kitchen counter, warm and ordinary, Completely at odds with the storm I felt inside, Tyler was already there, headphones on, laptop open, half-empty cereal bowl beside him, looking like any other 10-year-old doing homework. Yet the quiet precision in the way he moved, the way his fingers hovered over the keyboard, told me this was no ordinary morning. I poured my coffee, trying to act casual, pretending the tension coiling in my chest wasn't there. But every glance at him reminded me that my calm was fragile. He had been keeping notes, screenshots, timestamps, account histories exported into spreadsheets that should have been over his head. Yet there he was, piecing together patterns in our finances in a way that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. He didn't say a word about Mom, didn't accuse or dramatize. He just organized facts, showing what most adults, myself included, had missed in a sea of numbers. I leaned against the counter, trying to breathe, trying to process the quiet genius of my son. How had I not noticed this before? How had I assumed my adult logic was enough while he quietly compiled a case behind the scenes? He pulled up another sheet, showing balances over time, highlighting discrepancies in color-coded fashion. "Look," he said softly, almost reading my thoughts. "These add up differently than what Mom told you." The words weren't accusatory, just matter of fact. And that made it worse. I realized Tyler wasn't just clever. He was meticulous, patient, methodical. Every screenshot, note, and observation had been curated over months. I sipped my coffee, heart racing, watching his small hands navigate spreadsheets and screenshots with surgical precision, feeling fear, admiration, and awe twisting in my chest all at once. How had he noticed all this? How had I missed it? And while I'd been trying to hold myself together, acting like the adult who protects the family, Tyler had quietly built the evidence. The missing money wasn't just numbers anymore. It was a story, a trail of decisions, and at the center of it all, a 10-year-old unraveling it without anger or judgment, only observation. Tyler looked up from the screen, calm, and smiled faintly, not proud, not smug, just calm. "I'll handle this, Dad," he said quietly, and somehow that small, quiet confidence hit me harder than any confrontation ever could. I didn't know it yet, but Tyler wasn't done observing, and the next move would hit harder than anything I could have imagined. The next morning, the quiet felt heavier than usual, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I wandered into the kitchen, still half asleep, and found Tyler at the table, laptop open, notes scattered around him like a miniature command center. He didn't even glance up. He was too focused, absorbed in a world I couldn't yet see. I poured coffee and sank against the counter, heart racing, trying to process the scene. Rows of numbers blinked in red, green, yellow, Tyler's code of patterns. I sank into a chair, trying to catch my breath. As I watched him click, scroll, annotate, I realized he had already begun connecting dots I didn't even know existed. He had been using the same budgeting app I'd set up months ago, the one he'd tinkered with for fun, but now it had transformed into a detective's toolkit. I'd shown him the basics of spreadsheets last year, simple formulas, nothing impressive, but somehow, he amplified those lessons into an almost frightening understanding. Every tiny discrepancy was highlighted, every transfer traced, every odd behavior logged and correlated. "Dad," he said softly, voice calm, precise, "look at the patterns. They tell a story. Every detail matters." Fear and awe coiled together in my chest. How had I missed it? How could a 10-year-old see what I hadn't? He traced the timing of her calls, the way her excuses repeated, the shifts in tone that went unnoticed. He didn't yell, he didn't accuse, he just showed me, calmly, patiently, the evidence laid bare. I felt pride in his focus, his precision, but panic too, because this was beyond what any child should be doing. And yet there he was, orchestrating clarity in chaos. "It's not just the money, Dad," he added, eyes finally meeting mine. "Patterns show intent. They tell you who's playing and who's hiding." I swallowed hard. My attempts to stay composed, to act the adult, suddenly felt inadequate. Tyler had been ready for months, quietly gathering, observing, learning, and now he was revealing the scope of betrayal I hadn't even suspected. "I'm not done yet, Dad," he whispered, almost to himself. "There's more to see. You'll understand soon." I didn't know it then, but Tyler wasn't merely observing anymore. He was preparing, calculating, acting in silence. By the time I caught up, the rules of the game had already shifted. My 10-year-old son, the quiet one sitting in the morning light, had stepped into a role I didn't even know existed, and the weight of that realization pressed on me as spreadsheets, notes, and charts filled the kitchen table, a silent storm gathering before the real reckoning began. That evening, the house felt quieter than usual, but the silence wasn't comforting, it was tense, like the air before a storm breaks. I sat on the couch, laptop open, staring at numbers that refused to make sense. Tyler worked beside me with the precision of someone twice his age. He didn't rush, didn't panic, he just moved through spreadsheets, screenshots, and notes as if assembling a puzzle only he could see. Every so often, he'd glance up at me, calm eyes meeting mine, a flicker of reassurance that I needed more than I knew. "Dad," he said softly, "we just have to be patient. Watch the patterns. Every detail matters." I wanted to ask how he knew so much, how he could see the trails I'd completely missed, but the words got stuck in my throat because the truth was clear. Tyler had been watching, learning, documenting, quietly becoming the strategist of this mess while I was still trying to process panic. He had been using the same budgeting app I'd set up months ago, but what he did with it went beyond anything I'd imagined, tracking transfers, color-coding discrepancies, timestamping every unusual move. How could a 10-year-old see what I hadn't? I sipped my coffee, heart hammering, awe and fear coiled together as he explained, calmly, how the missing money had been drained, piece by piece, methodically, over weeks. "It's not a mistake, Dad," he said, "it's a pattern. And patterns tell stories." Was this just observation, or something bigger? I swallowed hard, realizing that while I'd been trying to act mature, to keep my cool and believe in normalcy, Tyler had quietly been learning the mechanics of betrayal, the rhythm of deception, the logic of someone who wanted to hide the truth. Every move he made on the laptop, every small adjustment, every annotation felt like a rehearsal for something bigger, something I didn't yet understand. As he leaned back for a moment, glancing at the glowing screen with that calm, unreadable expression, I understood that the next chapter wasn't about me catching up, it was about him taking the lead. I felt a mix of pride and terror, pride that he was capable, and terror that this situation required such capability at 10 years old. "I'll keep watching, Dad," he whispered, almost to himself, almost to me, "but we're not done yet, not by a long shot." In that quiet kitchen, as the hum of the laptop filled the background, I knew with a sinking certainty that my life, our family, and the definition of what it meant to protect my son were about to be rewritten by someone I'd underestimated all along. Tyler wasn't just a kid, he was a quiet force, patient, calculating, ready to act, and I had no idea how far he was willing to go to fix what had been broken. By the time I realized how serious this was, Tyler had already mapped everything quietly. He didn't yell, he didn't accuse, he just pulled up spreadsheets, highlighted transfers, and added tiny notes I barely understood. I sank into the chair beside him, trying to catch my breath. Each click of his mouse was deliberate, precise, like he was navigating a battlefield I couldn't even see. Spreadsheets, highlighted notes, color-coded columns, tiny arrows connected numbers across rows. It was cinematic. Rows of data blinked in red, green, and yellow, forming a map of patterns only he could read. I watched, heart hammering, as he connected dots I hadn't even noticed. How does a 10-year-old see all this? I remembered showing him basic spreadsheet skills a year ago, just little lessons, nothing serious. Now those seeds had grown into a full strategy tree, and he was wielding it with surgical precision. He didn't explain everything, just enough to make me gasp. Every time he highlighted a number, I felt the tension coil tighter around my chest. Every note, every pointed transfer, made it worse. He didn't dramatize, didn't accuse, he just calmly laid out the evidence. It wasn't just observation, it was a playbook. Dates slightly off, tiny transfers under thresholds, patterns of repeated behavior, it all added up, quietly screaming what I'd refused to see. My chest twisted with pride and terror. Pride that my son could notice, analyze, and anticipate. Terror that I'd been blind for so long. Patience. "Dad," he said quietly, eyes never leaving the screen. "Notice everything. Every clue tells a story." He was right. I realized Tyler wasn't just observing, he was planning, thinking 3 steps ahead. While I wrestled with fear and denial, He was already orchestrating moves I couldn't predict. I swallowed hard, feeling my role shift from protector to observer of his genius. Every click, every annotation, every highlight. One thing was clear, the game had shifted. Then it hit me, Tyler wasn't done. Not even close. His playbook was only beginning. And the next move was coming. Each silent click, each subtle highlight, each tiny arrow told me that he was already 3 steps ahead of everyone, even me. I was witnessing a quiet storm, a child stepping up when the adults faltered, and it left me both terrified and in awe. One thing was certain, I didn't know what Tyler had planned next, but I knew it would change everything, and I wasn't ready for it. The house felt almost too quiet as I watched Tyler work, my heart racing and my mind struggling to keep up with a 10-year-old operating like a seasoned strategist. His small fingers moved across the laptop with precision, each click, scroll, and annotation deliberate, silent, yet carrying a weight I could feel deep in my chest. Spreadsheets transformed into maps, numbers color-coded, lines connecting transfers like invisible threads only he could see. Tiny notes marking every irregularity, every overlooked transaction, every subtle slip I hadn't noticed. I sipped my coffee, trying to breathe. As awe and fear twisted together, how could a child be this calm, so methodical, so ready? He didn't just spot missing money, he traced the path, analyzed patterns, predicted moves I couldn't even see, and anticipated what could go wrong before it even happened. Watch carefully, Dad, he said, not looking up, voice calm but commanding. Every detail matters, every clue tells a story, and he was right. Every subtle message, every anomaly, every tiny irregularity had already been logged, connected, and ranked in his mind for when it would matter most. Months of curiosity, tinkering with spreadsheets, exploring little coding projects, these lessons had prepared him, but the depth of his focus, the speed of his reasoning, stunned me. The soft hum of the laptop and the faint creak of the floor punctuated each movement, each verification, each quiet revelation, and I felt simultaneously proud and terrified. Proud because this was my son protecting us, terrified because he was operating with a skill far beyond what I expected from someone his age. In his calm, I sensed a storm, a quiet readiness that charged the air with tension, making me hold my breath even as I admired him. He wasn't just observing, he was preparing, anticipating, thinking steps ahead, predicting moves I couldn't even see, connecting dots I hadn't even known existed. And in that moment, I realized the truth. The person paying the closest attention, silently gathering evidence and mapping every risk, wasn't me, it was him. Tyler's eyes stayed fixed on the screen, hands moving like clockwork, scanning, verifying, connecting patterns, and I knew nothing I did could speed him up or slow him down. He was in control of this storm, relentless yet calm, and whatever came next, the game had already shifted in our favor. I didn't yet know how far he would go or how audacious his next move would be, but one thing was certain, he had seen what I refused to, understood more than I admitted, and in that quiet room, illuminated only by the soft glow of the laptop, I felt the full weight of awe and fear, knowing the hidden moves he was making would change everything. The next morning, the house felt heavy with quiet, every sound amplified. As I watched Tyler cross-legged on the living room floor, laptop open, notebook spread around him like a tactical map, he wasn't just observing anymore, he was acting. His small hands moved deliberately over the keyboard, double-checking numbers, tracing transfers, and marking accounts with tiny color codes, each action a quiet declaration of control. Every spreadsheet revealed patterns, every note connected dots I hadn't even considered. And I sank into the couch, heart hammering, realizing he had already built a path to fix what had been broken. The missing money, drained piece by piece over weeks, wasn't just documented. Tyler had quietly orchestrated a recovery, moving it into a secure place only he and I could access, locking out the chaos before it could spread further. "Dad," he said without looking up, voice calm but resolute, "I've got it handled. Don't worry." For the first time in days, The tight coil of fear loosened slightly, replaced by awe, disbelief, and a sliver of terror at the audacity of what my 10-year-old had accomplished. Every click, every scroll, every carefully placed highlight and annotation was a masterstroke, revealing that this wasn't impulsive curiosity, this was a plan, a silent reversal, calculated with patience and foresight I could barely comprehend. I sipped my coffee, trying to process the enormity, watching rows of numbers blink in red and green, transfers cross-checked, and realized he had anticipated potential slip-ups and corrected them before I'd even noticed the problem. Months of subtle guidance and little lessons merged with his natural curiosity. The result? A system both brilliant and quietly terrifying. And through it all, he never boasted, never acted above his age, just worked silently and efficiently, as if nothing else mattered. The quiet intensity filled the room, making each keystroke feel monumental, each annotation a declaration, each step forward a small victory against the chaos that had crept into our lives. Watching him, I realized the child I had always thought I needed to protect had become the one protecting us, acting with courage, patience, and precision that made me question everything I assumed about maturity, responsibility, and intelligence. And as I leaned back, trying to catch my breath, I understood one unshakable truth: whatever came next, the momentum had shifted. Tyler had quietly reclaimed control, and the world we thought we knew, the one where adults managed the risks, was already changing under his steady hands. I didn't yet know the full extent of what he'd done or what he planned next. But one thing was clear: the silent reversal had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. By mid-morning, the air in the house felt electric, almost charged, as I watched Tyler sit at the kitchen table, laptop open, screens full of spreadsheets and notes, each color-coded cell and highlighted line mapping out a strategy one could barely follow. He wasn't just a 10-year-old anymore, he was a strategist, quietly flipping the balance of power in our family. Every keystroke, every scroll, every annotation seemed deliberate, almost surgical, and I felt a mix of awe, terror, and disbelief twist in my chest. The money, our son's college fund, nearly drained by my wife over weeks, was now being reclaimed piece by piece, moved into a secure wallet only Tyler and I could access, each transfer carefully timed and documented. He paused briefly to check a row of figures, eyes flicking from screen to notebook, as if anticipating every possible error, every potential loophole, correcting them before they could ever become problems. "Dad," he said quietly, not looking up, "we're almost there. Just a few more steps." His voice was calm, almost eerie in its confidence, but there was no arrogance, just relentless focus. I sipped my coffee, trying to steady my racing heart, realizing that this was more than just reclaiming stolen money. It was a lesson in precision, patience, and calculated courage. The room was littered with visual chaos that only he could decode: arrows connecting numbers, highlighted transactions, time-stamped notes, and subtle codes that mapped Jessica's movements and transfers like a battlefield plan. Watching him, I couldn't help but wonder how my 10-year-old had developed this foresight: months of subtle guidance, little lessons on spreadsheets and budgets I'd given him merged with his natural curiosity. And the result was a system both brilliant and terrifying in its quiet perfection. Every click was a small victory, every corrected error a step toward reclaiming control. And as I leaned back, chest tight with emotion, I realized something profound: the balance had shifted. The person I thought needed protecting had become the protector. Tyler was no longer just observing the chaos, he was directing it, silently, methodically, and with an instinct that made me question everything I thought I understood about responsibility, age, and courage. The quiet intensity filled the room, punctuated only by the soft hum of the laptop and the occasional scribble of a pen on paper. And I knew that once this process finished, nothing would be the same. Tyler had not only reversed the damage, he had rewritten the rules. I didn't yet know the full consequences or how far he would take it, but I could feel the weight of what he had accomplished. And even in that moment of quiet awe, one thought pulsed through my mind: the shift in power was complete. And the story we thought we were living, the one where adults controlled the outcomes, was over. Tyler had silently taken command. And the next move, whatever it was, would be unstoppable. I watched Tyler with my chest tight, trying to wrap my mind around what was happening in real time. He wasn't just a kid sitting at a laptop anymore. He was a strategist, orchestrating moves I couldn't fully comprehend. I wondered how my 10-year-old had developed this foresight. Months of lessons on spreadsheets and budgeting, combined with his natural curiosity, merged into a system both brilliant and quietly terrifying. Each screen held pieces of the puzzle, highlighted transactions, color-coded columns, time-stamped notes, tiny arrows connecting numbers across rows like a tactical map. Every click was deliberate, every scroll a small victory. And then, the moment came. Tyler moved the stolen money into a secure wallet, a place only he and I could access. I could feel the gravity of the act before I even understood the mechanics. That single transfer was more than numbers shifting. It was the reversal of power, the reclaiming of control, and a silent declaration that the game had changed. He didn't announce it. He didn't celebrate. He just nodded to himself, eyes flicking across rows of data, as if confirming that everything aligned perfectly. I sipped my coffee slowly, trying to calm my racing heart, but fear and awe twisted together in my chest. How could a 10-year-old do this? How had I missed all the signs? Tyler's quiet intensity filled the room, the soft hum of the laptop and the scratching of his pen the only sounds punctuating the tension. The spreadsheets, the highlights, the codes, they weren't just numbers. They were his map, his strategy, and his proof that observation and patience could achieve what brute force and adult authority could not. Every annotation he made was like a tiny step toward righting wrongs I hadn't yet confronted. And in that stillness, I realized something profound. The person I thought needed protecting had become the protector. My son had not only identified the problem, he had fixed it silently, methodically, without fanfare, and with an instinct that felt almost superhuman. Yet beneath the calm, I saw the weight of responsibility he carried, the sleepless nights and careful calculations that had brought him here. The shift in power wasn't just about money, it was about awareness, courage, and quiet mastery over a situation that had threatened to spiral out of control. I didn't know the full consequences yet, but I could feel the change. Tyler had taken command, and the next steps, whatever they were, would be unstoppable. I leaned back, chest heavy, realizing that the life I thought I controlled had already been rewritten by a 10-year-old who had quietly, calmly, and brilliantly flipped the script. The silent reversal had occurred, and nothing would ever feel the same again. Every chart, every color-coded column, every arrow linking numbers, each was a breadcrumb of Tyler's genius. He wasn't just observing, he was orchestrating, anticipating, controlling. I sank into the chair across from him, my chest tight, trying to breathe past the knot of awe and fear that had taken residence there. The glow from his laptop painted the kitchen in soft blues and whites, highlighting tiny annotations, timestamps, and patterns only he could see. I watched as he hovered over the screen, fingers poised, methodical. Then it happened. Tyler moved the stolen money into a secure wallet. Only he and I could access it. A quiet thrill, and a weight, settled in my chest as I realized the power had shifted. The money wasn't just safe. It was untouchable to anyone who tried to manipulate it. I swallowed hard, heart hammering, realizing that months of subtle guidance, little lessons I'd given him on spreadsheets and budgets, merged seamlessly with his natural curiosity. The result was a system both brilliant and terrifying in its quiet perfection. I felt an adrenaline spike, not from fear alone, but from disbelief, pride, and relief all tangled together. How had a 10-year-old seen what I hadn't? How had I missed all the warning signs? Tyler didn't brag, didn't smirk, didn't celebrate. He simply leaned back, calm, eyes flicking to mine, as if asking silently, "You see now, Dad?" My mind raced. This wasn't just a kid being smart, this was a strategist, a protector, a silent guardian who had taken the chaos I hadn't dared to confront and folded it into a plan that worked flawlessly. The hum of the laptop, The soft shuffle of papers, the quiet clicks of his annotations, it all felt cinematic. Like watching a chess grandmaster move in real time, every piece perfectly placed, every contingency anticipated. I could feel my pulse in my throat as I processed it. The sheer audacity of what he'd done left me both awed and unnerved. And in that quiet kitchen, lit only by his screen, it hit me, the person shielding our family, the one acting when adults faltered, wasn't me, it was him, Tyler, my 10-year-old son. Every fear I'd carried, every sleepless night I'd endured, suddenly felt smaller, reframed by the immensity of his focus, patience, and intelligence. I leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper, trying to articulate the storm of emotion. Tyler, how? He just shrugged, calm as a monk, eyes steady, no explanation needed. The lesson was clear. In that moment, I realized that being an adult wasn't about staying calm, it was about noticing, trusting, and sometimes letting the smallest person in the room lead. And I still had no idea how far he was willing to go. The stolen money was secure, beyond her reach, in a place only Tyler and I could access. Sitting there, I felt a strange mix of awe and disbelief. My 10-year-old had done what I couldn't even imagine doing myself. He hadn't just noticed patterns, traced transactions, or connected the dots. He had acted. Tyler had done more than protect money. He had protected our family, our future, our sanity. I sank into the chair beside him, watching the faint glow of the laptop illuminate his focused face. Every keystroke deliberates, every note carefully placed, every highlighted number a breadcrumb of his brilliance. It wasn't chaos he had created. It was order, methodical, precise, a quiet intelligence that turned a desperate situation into a controlled one. As I absorbed what had just happened, I realized the irony. The person I had underestimated the most, my 10-year-old, was now the one steering the ship, keeping us afloat while my wife remained blind to the reversal. Notifications pinged quietly in the background, but none belonged to her. She had no idea, no warning, no chance to interfere. Tyler's small hands hovered over the keyboard for a brief moment before he leaned back, exhaling softly, like he'd just completed a mission that should have been impossible for anyone, let alone a child. I wanted to speak, to ask him how, why, but the words caught in my throat. Every chart, every color-coded column, every arrow linking numbers, each was a breadcrumb of his genius. He wasn't just observing, he was orchestrating, anticipating, controlling. And I realized something critical. This wasn't just about money. This was about trust, about resilience, about the quiet power a child can wield when adults fail to see, when the world around them underestimates them. For the first time in weeks, I felt a calm that wasn't fear, it was relief, pride, and a deep, almost terrifying respect. Tyler looked up, catching my gaze, and without a word, I understood. He'd taken control, he'd reversed what could have been a disaster. And though I didn't yet know what came next, I also knew one thing with certainty. Tyler wasn't just my son anymore. He was our safeguard, our strategist, and the quiet hero in the middle of a storm I hadn't even realized was raging. Every notification, every spreadsheet, every calculated move had led us here. And in that moment, I felt the full weight of what he had accomplished, and the uneasy awareness that our lives had just shifted in ways that no one outside that room would ever understand. The morning after Tyler secured the money felt unreal. Jessica woke expecting control, expecting her plan to unfold, but the house was quiet in a way that didn't fit her expectations. She checked her phone, then the bank app, and froze. Her access was gone. Panic flashed across her face, raw and sudden. But not yet aimed at Tyler or me. I watched from the doorway, coffee in hand, heart hammering. As reality sank in, Tyler sat at his desk, calm, eyes scanning the laptop. Not a hint of gloating, just quiet focus. Every missed notification worked in our favor. Every blocked transfer, every tiny detail Tyler had anticipated. I realized my son had done something no 10-year-old should ever have to do. He had become the protector, the strategist, the one holding the family together while the adult floundered. Jessica's boyfriend called, panicked, demanding answers she didn't have. She stuttered, realizing her carefully built fantasy was crumbling. Every excuse, lie, and rationalization mattered none. The stolen money wasn't just safe, it was untouchable. A fortress built quietly by a child who had observed, learned, and acted while the adults around him missed the obvious. I felt awe and terror coil together in my chest. This wasn't just about finances. It was about control, foresight, and the unexpected power a child could wield when adults failed. Tyler didn't need to speak. His presence, his focus, his calm authority said it all. I sipped my coffee slowly, trying to process the reversal of roles. I wasn't leading, planning, or protecting. I was watching, learning, silently grateful that Tyler had stepped up. The notifications kept coming, each ping a reminder that our lives were shifting, that Jessica's plan had collapsed, and that Tyler had just saved us from a collapse I couldn't have prevented myself. The chaos wasn't over, but with him in control, it wouldn't touch us. One truth was undeniable: my son had changed everything. By mid-morning, the consequences of Tyler's quiet takeover began to unfold like a row of falling dominoes. Jessica moved through the house in a daze, her phone clenched in one hand, her laptop open in the other, eyes darting between numbers she couldn't control and messages she couldn't respond to. Every attempt to regain access failed. Every call to her boyfriend ended in frustration. He was as unprepared for this reversal as she was. I watched from the hallway, leaning against the doorframe, coffee cooling in my hand, awe and anxiety wrestling in my chest. Tyler sat at his desk, the picture of calm authority, moving effortlessly between spreadsheets, color-coded charts, and highlighted transfers. Each click, each annotation, each tiny arrow connecting numbers across rows felt deliberate, surgical. I realized he wasn't just observing, he was orchestrating, predicting, controlling the unfolding chaos with precision I didn't even know he could muster. How had he learned all this? How had he turned months of subtle guidance and lessons on budgeting into a system capable of dismantling an adult's plan without anyone realizing it until the end? The quiet hum of the laptop, the blinking notifications, and the soft tapping of keys filled the kitchen, layering tension over the stunned silence. I couldn't believe the role reversal. My 10-year-old had become the strategist, the guardian, the one who anticipated every move while I, supposedly the responsible adult, simply watched and followed. Jessica's frustration was palpable. She paced, muttering half-formed threats, realizing her control was gone. Her boyfriend tried calling again, demanding explanations she didn't have, and I saw the fear in her eyes deepen. Tyler didn't flinch. Every pattern she had relied on, every flaw she assumed would go unnoticed, had been quietly mapped, analyzed, and neutralized. I felt a chill, realizing that the person keeping our family safe wasn't me, it was him. The dominoes kept falling, one by one, but Tyler had positioned them so carefully that the outcome was predictable, contained, and irreversible. I swallowed hard, heart racing, knowing that this quiet morning had shifted everything. The chaos, the betrayal, the tension, it all pointed back to one undeniable truth: my son had just outmaneuvered the adults, and there was no turning back. The morning unfolded like a carefully plotted game, and Tyler was already several steps ahead. Jessica's panic was obvious, gripping her phone, pacing, muttering half-formed plans that dissolved before they could take effect, while Tyler remained calm, eyes scanning each spreadsheet, each alert, predicting moves I couldn't even see. Every attempt she made to regain control failed. Every blocked transfer, every missed notification, every trapped loophole stacked into something bigger. Tyler hadn't just reclaimed money, he had reclaimed control, security, and order in a house that had been unraveling. I watched, heart hammering, as he clicked, scrolled, and annotated with precise, silent intent. Tyler's fingers hovered over one last move. He didn't need to speak. The plan was already unfolding exactly as he envisioned. Months of subtle lessons, combined with his curiosity and careful observation, had built this system, a quiet genius in motion, outthinking adults with calm calculation. Each highlight, every tiny arrow connecting numbers, was a breadcrumb of his strategy. Jessica's frantic energy collided with his composed execution, and it was clear who held the upper hand. The quiet strategist had spoken, and the house had learned to follow his lead, whether anyone else realized it or not. I sank into the doorway, awe and fear twisting in my chest. This wasn't just about money, it was about a 10-year-old protecting a family in a way I never could. And even as the tension hung thick in the room, one thing was undeniable: Tyler's calm, methodical intelligence had shifted the balance entirely, and there was no turning back. The storm had passed, Jessica's frantic plans had dissolved, the stolen money was gone, secured in a place only Tyler and I could access. And for the first time, I understood the full weight of what my son had done. He hadn't just reversed a theft, he had orchestrated the entire reversal with patience, precision, and foresight far beyond his age. I sank into the chair across from him, trying to process awe, fear, and pride all at once. Tyler leaned back slightly, eyes scanning the quiet house. Everything was as it should be. He had done more than protect money, he had preserved us. Months of subtle lessons, little nudges on spreadsheets, guidance I had offered him, merged with his natural curiosity to create a system that outmaneuvered an adult who had meant to destroy. And in that moment, I realized the truth I had been avoiding: the person who had saved our family wasn't me, it was Tyler. Calm, deliberate, unshakable, he was the quiet strategist in a world that had threatened to spiral out of control. The legal aftermath was almost routine because Tyler's evidence left no room for doubt. Divorce papers were signed, custody agreements finalized, and assets secured. But the real victory wasn't legal, it was emotional. Tyler had protected not just our finances, but our trust, our safety, and the fragile sense of normalcy in a life that had teetered on the edge. Months later, Jessica returned. She claimed she had changed. She sought visitation. She tried to reopen doors she had slammed shut herself. I watched from a distance, unsure of what to say. Tyler's eyes met mine briefly, calm and steady, and then looked back at her. "I'm not ready to forgive yet," he said. No drama, no screaming, just quiet resolve carrying the weight of everything we had endured. That one line ended the story in a way words alone could never capture: a 10-year-old asserting boundaries, protecting what mattered, and teaching the adults around him to see clearly. As we walked home together, side by side, I finally understood the depth of what had happened. Betrayal had struck us at the core, but it had revealed something extraordinary: the courage of a child who had grown up too fast, the quiet strength of a parent willing to learn, and the bond between us that no one could break. We had lost innocence, yes, but gained clarity, resilience, and a renewed understanding of trust. Even as the city outside carried on, oblivious to the quiet war that had raged within our walls, I knew one thing with certainty: Tyler's calm, foresight, and courage had changed everything, and nothing would ever be the same.